Hey guys, good morning. Welcome back to our weekly recap video. Real quick before we get into the videos, I just wanted to let you guys know that we have decided not to attend the Boston Flower and Garden Show this weekend that we had been announcing to you guys and talking about the last several months. We just felt like with the current climate and things that are going on, which I'm not going to actually say the actual words, because if I do, YouTube will demonetize this video and won't send it out to any of you. But you guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, there's been a lot of activity in that area, and we just felt like it was the best decision for us not to go. And I certainly don't want to discourage any of you from going. It's just when we attend shows, it's a little bit different for us. I end up shaking a lot of hands, and I feel like the risk goes up for me just a little bit. And I'm not an alarmist or a hypochondriac at all, and that's my favorite part about going to the shows. It's not the presentations, because that's really not in my wheelhouse. I don't feel like I'm very good at that, but I love meet and greets. I love to meet you guys because it refocuses me. I mean, I get to meet you face to face, which I don't get on a daily basis, and it really reminds me, like, you guys are like the people I'm meeting, that's who I'm making the videos for, and it's just a wonderful experience, and I love it. So we didn't make the decision lightly. It was a really kind of nervous thing for me to have to announce, because we had so many messages from those of you who had already made travel plans, and I just, like, the weight of that, I just felt like, oh, I don't want to say that we're not going, but you guys, when we announced it yesterday, we put a post up on Facebook and YouTube, overwhelming support for what we had decided, and I just wanted to thank you for that, because it made me feel like, okay, I think we made the right decision. And for those of you who are still planning on attending the show, I hope that you really enjoy yourselves. I mean, soak it in, take in the inspiration, because they really are a fun time to gather ideas and get ready for the season. And in terms of the other show that we're planning on attending, it's in Boise on Saturday, March 28th. We're still planning on attending. Of course, we'll be watching the news and making sure we're up to date on all of that. And I mean, it's really close to home, and there hasn't been any reports of anything going on in our area yet. So anyway, at this point, we are planning on attending that one. So we are up in the plant room this morning. With the time change, it's still a little bit dark outside, and it is getting interesting in here. In fact, Erin, you should get your cell phone out and show what it looks like. Okay, so you can see all the grow lights around me right now. They're all packed with plants, including plants like spilling out on the floor. But look at all of the trays I have on the floor right now. I think there's like 12 trays I need to reorganize in here and find room for all of these flower seeds to go underneath lights. Thank goodness it's getting warmer outside. I can start moving, hopefully, some of these things at least into the cold frame. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that we do have a second channel. It's called Garden Answer Highlights, and we are trying, we just put like compilation videos on there or shortened up videos. We're also trying to out some unedited videos. So like this week we posted a video of me planting up the lemon cypress with the blue pansies and white ranunculus. And in our video that we put out on this channel, of course, it was sped up and there was some really cool effects, and it just makes the project go a little bit faster. But on highlights, we put like the full uncut version of me planting. So it's just quiet, you can hear birds, and I'm just doing my thing. So if you want to check out what that is like, we will put the link down below. Okay, so let's jump into the videos. The first one was where I harvested my pink lemonade lemons and baked a lemon cake. So the pink lemonade lemons, I actually ended up harvesting every single one off of the tree for that recipe. I did put a little bit, like a couple notes in the description of the video or in the first comment of the video, letting you guys know some adjustments I would make, because the cake was lemony, and I probably would like tone it down just a little bit. But in terms of the pink lemonade lemons, they did have more of an apricot pink color when I cut into them. I feel like some of them weren't, like they could have been left on the tree a little bit longer, but the flavor was great. The aroma was amazing. So anyway, it was really a fun project. Jim asked, what is that cool hedge at your parents' garden center? I love it. So those are winter gem boxwoods, and they've been just trained into kind of a wave formation. Rosemary said, how do you thin out the fruits? So you can either pop off blooms, or you can wait till the fruit sets on the tree and you can pop off fruit. And what that does is just, well, it eliminates some energy that the plant would be sending into all of the little fruits, and rather it'll be sending it into fewer fruits, so those fruits can get bigger and such. Lisa said, everyone is saying Erin was right, but we always counted and then you owe me a Coke. Thank you, Lisa. I think you and I are alone in this, because the whole rule of jinx, I think everybody has a little bit of a different take on it, and it must be regional, but I think the one that I heard the most was pinch, poke, you owe me a Coke, right? Never heard that before in my life. In our house, it was Jinx, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you owe me a Coke. And if the other person jumps in and says stop before you get to 10, then it stops the whole process and they can't jinx you. Aaron didn't grow up that way. It was just Jinx, you owe me a Coke, right? Or did the other person have to be silent until they were like unjinxed? I heard that too.
Among some groups. If you if you said Jinx, you owe me a Coke, and then you could say 1, 2, 3, and it didn't stop at 10, you could go forever, and that's how many Cokes the person would owe you. So if you got to like 27, then that person owed you.
I've heard that before.
27 Cokes.
Oh, okay. So there's that. Thank you, Lisa. You and I together. Connie said, I have a question about the pot you used to cook the fillings for the cake. Is this part of the set you tested in a video a while back? I'm looking for a new set of pots, and I love that you can use metal utensils. Me too. So those are part of the Analon Advanced Home Cookware set, and they're nonstick, and you can use metal tools on them. And I get a lot of comments like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're using these metal whisks or whatever in these pots, but they're actually, it's okay to do that. Now, I don't know a lot in the kitchen, obviously. So I've been learning a lot in the comment section about, proper ways to treat pans and pots and such, which I actually do really appreciate. But I really extra appreciate that these pots are so tough and they can withstand the way that I treat them. RK said, do you do anything to treat your whitefly infestation? Clouds of them while cutting the lemons. Those actually were not whiteflies. That was a mixture of dust and hard water deposits that were coming off of that tree. So I gave those trees a bath before they came in the fall. So I hosed them down, which was probably the wrong thing. I should have like taken the blower after them, like at a really low speed to get the dust off of them, because when I gave them an overhead bath with our hose water, it created a bunch of hard water deposits all over the leaves. And I just wasn't thinking about it. Our water is just horribly hard. So whenever I go in there and move the tree around, like this hard water, hard water flakes that come off the leaves. If you do have a whitefly infestation, though, a couple things that you can use, which I have found helpful, they're revenge sticks. They're like the yellow sticky paper stuff that you can stick on a stick and then put them in your pots, and then the whiteflies are attracted to it, and it really takes the population down without needing to spray. So I think those work really well. I also have used the Rose RX. I feel like that's like the miracle spray. I use that all the time in the greenhouse. It's an organic for natural gardening spray. You could also use something pyrethrum based or neem based for a whitefly infestation. You want to make sure to get all the foliage and the soil down below. And you can even scrape off like the top inch layer of soil and discard it and put fresh down. That also helps too. And also not keeping everything super wet all the time, like backing off and let things dry out a little bit. That also helps. Julie said, I planted 5 seeds or so that a friend gave me, and many are sprouting. How are yours doing? I'll show you. So I planted 5 seeds as well. This one is clearly ahead of the game. We've got 2 that are up and a little bit taller, but I don't see any leaves. It's like almost something ate the tops off. I don't know what's going on there. But then there's 2 brand new sprouts this morning. I just noticed those today. So far, successful experiment. Mary said, not lemon related, but I'm so jealous of your pussy willow branches, which I have a bunch of them on our kitchen island. So they were probably made an appearance in that video. She said, I saw them at the grocery store the other day and they were 2 stems for $7. Whoa, that's expensive. Can you tell me about growing them? I'm a zone 5A, Northern Colorado. You should be able to grow them in your growing zone. I'm a zone 5 as well. And the one that I have out in my garden, I have 3 of them. They're the black cat pussy willows, and they are amazing. We just put them in this last spring, and then I went out and coppice pruned one of them. So I cut it all the way back down to the ground in an effort to keep it a little bit smaller, but so far they're doing really well. So you might check out that variety. Mel said, did you taste the pink lemons? Do they taste as sour as the other lemons? I didn't really notice a huge difference. They tasted like lemon to me. Benjamin tried it, and he came back in for a second big taste. Like he put teeth marks in the side of the lemon, and he decided after that, the second try, he wasn't into it. Betty said, now that you've tried both lemons, do you have a preference? Again, I don't really have a preference. I thought both of them, both the Meyer lemon and the pink lemonade, both tasted amazing. The zest was equally as good off of both of them. I don't know. I don't really have a preference though. Rebecca said, are those lemons just growing through the winter on your sun porch? Yes, they are. I've just been having such great luck with those lemons and limes. In fact, I told my mom, I'm like, if you can get your hands on some oranges and some nectarines, not nectarines. Is it nectarine? Nectarines are like a peach. Oranges and what's the other one? Tangerine. If you can get your hands on oranges or tangerine or both, I would love to try them because I'm having such good luck up there. It's an unheated sun porch. So I have a little floor heater on there that kicks on if it gets extra cold, like if it gets in the low 20s. But I think they're doing so well because they're not in the house and they're not getting like forced air, and they are getting cooler, which I think they do prefer. And then Twinkle said, what does Benjamin call you now? Is he still calling you no-no? So I tweeted a while ago that Benjamin was calling Aaron Dada and he was calling me no-no, which like is hopefully not an indication of how Benjamin saw me at that point. But no, he calls me mom, mama. That's basically it. But it's the sweetest thing because you'll hear him in the back seat in the car and he'll go, Mom, moon, mama, tractor. And I'm like, oh, it's a sweet, sweet little boy. Okay, next video was the end of winter garden tour, and we just took you on a walk around our garden to show you what it looks like right now. It's pretty stark. However, it is very cleaned up. Chris and I, mostly Chris, have been really working hard to get it up and ready to go for this upcoming season. And I just wanted to show you because I think it's easy to get discouraged, especially this time of year, and especially if you're kind of new to gardening. It's discouraging to see what the garden looks like right now because you feel like how come my garden doesn't look better? So I just wanted to show you what a real garden looks like when it's still wintertime. Russell, what are you doing? Oh, he's got mud all over your feet. What have you been into? Did he just come in through the window?
No, he came in this way.
Oh, okay. All right, so Beth said, love your videos and have learned a lot over the past couple years. That makes me happy to hear. When you were on the west side of your property, did I see accent lighting? If so, would you consider doing a video about the type you use and how you decide what to accent? So the only lighting we really have outside are solar lights. They were like $5 at the Home Depot. And we just pop them in the ground wherever we decide. I don't know, it's basically Aaron. Wherever Aaron decides there needs to be light. And it's usually on really pretty concrete pieces or like up the trunk of a tree. That's typically what we have lit. But we have those kind of popped all over the garden, and it works really well for us because we get a ton of sun. And they pop on when the light goes away at nighttime, and then they stay on for like 5 or 6 hours. They work just really great, and they don't require power, which is awesome. Crazy Blonde says, I saw those beautiful espalier fruit trees at the most recent garden show you attended and am now determined to try my hand at some in my own garden. Have you ever tried this technique? Yes, I have. At our old garden, I did 2 apple trees up against our house. And it was amazing. And those trees, those pear trees, were in the Christensen's nursery greenhouse, Christensen's nursery display. It was the Hilltop Farm, and it was just gorgeous. Would you be able to recommend any great sources on how to learn to espalier? You know what? I haven't actually looked at. I'm sure there's a lot of videos, and we will probably do some at some point when I get ready to do that because I love that method. I think it looks really neat. So I would just start rooting around on YouTube and see what you can find. I'm sorry I don't have a recommendation at this point. I also remember you had said in the past you wanted to train some fruit trees up your arch that you installed recently. Do you have any plans yet? No, and I don't think I'm going to do fruit trees on those now because now I'm putting the fruit trees somewhere else and our ideas have kind of shifted a little bit, but I do have a few ideas and we will definitely bring you along once I decide what's actually going there. Phelan said, Russell is looking even more glorious and shiny than usual. What's his secret? Frequent dust baths in the pasture up in front of our house, I think. Andrea said, with the concrete containers, will you need to dig out and replace the soil every year? We typically do, but it's usually really easy because at the end of the season, we usually do like a big centerpiece plant, like a grass or something like that, typically. And we use pretty vigorous annuals like Supertunias and Ipomea. So that typically in a pot that big, the roots will make it all the way down to the bottom of the pot. And when you clean them out in the fall, they come out in one big piece. So it's easy to remove all the soil. On huge giant pots, it might be like the pots downtown. I think one time in 8 years we've completely replaced the soil just because we usually have evergreen centerpieces we leave in there for a lot of years, and we replace as much of the loose soil as we can. And that's why in those sorts of cases, fertilizing consistently is extra important. I mean, I typically like to start with fresh every season, and I'll do a spring, summer, and fall planting from the same soil. but I like to start fresh at the beginning of every year. That way, you know, that you're starting with good soil that has nutrients in it, and the plants can draw a little bit from that. Petra said, when will you be pruning your hydrangeas? Hopefully this week, and it will be different for everybody. Typically you want to wait until you see the buds start to green up, swell and green up, and I'm just seeing that now. So hopefully we'll have a video for you very soon. Ken said, hi Laura, did you already prune back your lavender? I used to do it in the fall, but thought I'd try it in the spring like you. You know what, I actually typically cut my lavender back in the fall, and I think this might be the first year I've saved it to spring, and it wasn't on purpose, it's just I didn't get to it in the fall. And I trim lavender different than most people, I think. And I'll explain it in the video. We will do a video about lavender pruning, and I will talk about how I do it versus how like professionals will do it. Yes, hopefully soon. Tess said, how do you know when it's time to fertilize your plants in the spring? Again, you want to wait until you see some action. You want to see them start to wake up, the buds start to green up, maybe even when they're starting to initially leaf out. You don't want to do it too early, because if the plant's if it's still dormant and it's not actively growing yet, then it might, depending on how much moisture you get, it could be a little bit wasteful, because if you get a lot of rain and you fertilize and it washes the fertilizer, some of it away, and your plant's not actually utilizing it at that time, you know, you just want to wait until the plant actually needs it. So we are starting to do fertilizing. We did a little bit last week, and we'll start doing a lot this week and next week. Trudy said, how do you keep all that gravel weed free? Burnout. You guys, we used Burnout pretty much exclusively last year, and it worked really well. The thing about it is, if you look on the back of the bottle, it gives you different percent rates of mixing. And we went ahead and mixed it at the highest percent rate it recommended, because we have some really tough weeds like goat heads. Another name for it is puncture vine. We also have bindweed. And the Burnout, when we mixed it at the lower rate, which is what I had been doing in previous years, it didn't really completely take care of those really tough weeds, and I didn't know you could mix it stronger. So now that we've been doing that, we keep it on a fairly consistent schedule. Like, we try to spray once a week with the Burnout, maybe every other week, depending on how it's going and how much the weeds you're growing. Like in the spring, when there's a lot of active growth, it'll be every week to keep the gravel nice and tidy. And then when it kind of backs off, like during the middle of summer when it's really hot, they're not quite as like thick, I guess, and we can go a little bit more in between. We have done a video about it, so we'll try to remember to link it down below. Lori said, do you plant anything else with all your tulips that will cover or bloom once tulips fade and provide additional visual interest and discourage weeds outside of tulip bloom time? Yes. So in most areas, I like to have, and I don't do this all the time, but I like to have my beds pretty much full, like with perennials and shrubs and stuff. I like to have them kind of set before I plant my tulip bulbs in and amongst all the plants that kind of behind our chicken coop. I have that completely full of shrubs and perennials, and then I went in and planted 600 tulips. And it's really easy because you can just kind of pop them in between plants, and then the tulips come up in the spring, bloom beautifully, you cut back the foliage after it yellows, and then your perennials kind of take over. In other areas, like up in our Versailles area where I've got tulips around an urn, I had the tulips planted first, and then I go in when I'm getting ready to cut back the tulip leaves after they're all spent. I go in with my annuals at the same time, and I plant them in between the bunches of tulips, and then those take over for the rest of the season. So there's usually always something that kind of takes over and looks pretty. Wanda said, my husband was wondering what fabric or weed barrier you use before you mulch and plant. So I've only used weed barrier in a couple of spots in our yard. I typically don't like to use it. I did use it in our greenhouse. So before we put the gravel down, it's DeWitt Pro is the only kind of lawn weed barrier that I use, because it's amazing. It's so tough and stuff just doesn't grow through it. So we put that down before the gravel, because I did not want to have to use spray ever around our greenhouse, because we deal with so much plant material around that area. The only other two areas I use it are like under our arborvitae hedge and under boxwood hedging, because we have bindweed really bad. And if bindweed takes off in a hedge, you can't spray the bindweed out and not hit your plants or your hedge at the same time. So you're pretty much like hosed if you get bindweed in your hedges. So we put it like in the Versailles area where we planted boxwoods, and then on our west side where we have the arbs. And that way it saves us a lot of headache. Kim said, I need to put a brick base under my large containers. Could you please show footage when the bases are installed under your big concrete pots along the fence? I really have no clue what would be involved. So we are having the brick pads installed underneath the 14 big, beautiful containers we just got from Unique Stone, just like we had installed underneath the 4 urns on the west side. And we don't do that ourselves. We have somebody who's a professional come in and do it because he levels everything up to where when you look at that line of pots, everything will look perfect. And I am not a perfectionist when it comes to stuff like that, like precision. I am horrible at that. So what he does, though, it's pretty interesting because I kind of watched what they were doing. He almost installs those brick pads like you would a pathway. So he digs out the area and then puts down a couple different layers. So compacts the soil, then puts down like a crushed gravel and then compacts that. And then there's a finer gravel that goes on top of that that's compacted. And then the bricks go on, and then they put that like a locking sand. It's kind of like a concrete sand that you brush into the cracks and then wet it down, and it like binds everything together. So we'll try to get as much footage as we can. Next video was garden cleanup at my grandparents' house. So Chris, Aaron, and I headed over to my grandparents because my grandpa just had some surgery on his knee and is recovering, and they have a pretty sizable yard that he loves to work in, and my grandma works in it as well. And they hadn't got through all of their cleanup before the surgery, and so anyway, we decided that it would be fun to go just help them out. So we brought you guys along for that day. Tina said, I've been starting spring cleanup and I want to be prepared for fertilizing. I've watched some older videos and you had used rose tone on your hydrangeas for the first time to see if you liked it, and I did that last year. Have you continued to use that? I want to be prepared with the types of fertilizers I'll need. So I am going to probably continue on with rose tone with the hydrangeas because my hydrangeas did really well last year. And honestly, like they did well with holly tone too. So you could probably do either or and have success. We are planning on putting together some fertilizing videos here really soon. McKenna said, did you just say the sound of the lawnmower is your favorite? I just heard a neighbor fire up their lawnmower. It's like the best sound to me. I love it. It's definitely the opposite for me. It just seems like every time we try to sit outside, someone is mowing the lawn. It, for me, is like music to my ears because it means somebody is taking care of their yard. There are a lot of yards around here where people, it's probably the same everywhere, where people just don't take very good care. So whenever I hear like a chainsaw or I hear a lawnmower, it just, to me, I'm like, yes, somebody is outside like taking care of their yard to make it look nice, and they're probably having a good time doing it. Dogs barking, however, just, oh, like, like that will send me, yeah, straight inside. Paula said, what does your grandfather have growing up onto his pergola? He has grapes, which we benefit from every year. He usually brings us a box of grapes. So he's got 3 different kinds, and I can't remember. He was telling me one's a red, or maybe a couple are reds, and one's a black. Anyway, that's what he's got. Hunter said, where did you get those green bins that you put weeds in? Those are from Fiskars. They are the pop-up, collapsible pop-up bags, kangaroo pop-up bags. We'll link them down below. Jeannie said, did I miss seeing Aaron during the cleanup? You and Chris did a lot of work. So I did see that comment a lot, and I really wanted to talk about it because Aaron is actually behind the camera, moving the camera around, setting up the shots, making sure things are in focus. So he's working, but he's doing a different kind of work that you don't see, which is unfortunate. And what you didn't see also is that he was taking loads to the truck while we were working. So he would set the camera up and he'd grab a full bin and take it and dump it for us. So he was doing a lot of unseen work, but a camera person is like a full-time job. And I know this now because when I do vlogs, when I'm vlogging by myself and I'm setting up cameras myself to get a bunch of different shots, it takes me all day to do like 2 projects because it's a ton of work when you don't have that second pair of hands like doing that and focusing on that. So anyway, that's where Aaron was, behind the camera. Shelby said, are these your maternal or paternal grandparents? Those are my dad's parents. So they actually live like, I don't know, is that a mile from us? Like less than a mile maybe? Down the road. So they live like maybe less than a mile down the road from where we live right now, and they've lived in the same house for my entire life. And then Aaron's parents just live like right around the corner from him. It's really kind of nice to have family so close. Kat says, are we going to see you at your sister-in-law's house again this year? You will not, because they sold that house, which is a total bummer. I mean, I'm happy for them. They moved they moved somewhere else, and we will be at their new place, which you are going to love. It's going to be really fun. But we were kind of in the middle of that yard project. The new owner, though, was really excited. She was really excited about the way it was shaping up and the plants that were there. So I think she'll have fun with it. We just won't be involved with the rest of it. Pandora said, I heard the wind chime in his yard, and it occurred to me that I've never noticed any wind chimes in your garden. Do you have any? Do you like them in the garden? I like them in other people's gardens. That's a noise I forgot to mention earlier, like dogs barking, wind chimes just drive me nuts. They always have. My mom and dad have like one wind chime, and it's okay because it's really deep sounding. It's like kind of like a gong kind of sound, which I don't mind as much, but like anything really tinkly, or is that the right word? Really high pitched, or something that we get a lot of wind here, so I think it would just drive me nuts if I had one. Green Thumbelina said, was the stump that Chris pulled out being used as a point of interest in your grandparents' garden? It was not, and my grandpa actually said, if you guys can get that out, that would be awesome. And so we kind of looked at it and thought, well, we'll try, but we didn't know, like, we didn't know if it would come up easy, and Chris like tugged on it twice and got it out like in one big piece. So that was really nice. But I know a lot of people like to use stumps and different pieces of wood and stones and that kind of thing as kind of yard art of sorts. But my grandpa didn't want that one there. Tina said, first of all, speedy recovery to your grandfather. Thank you. Several questions. Are you a third generation gardener? Yes. Did you garden with them as a kid? Not really. I gardened with my parents. I didn't garden with my grandparents though. And then those were my dad's parents. And last about Chris, was he as knowledgeable as you in gardening when he started working for you? He has some plant knowledge. He worked at a growing facility, but it was mostly dealing with coleus and heuchera. So he has some knowledge, but he's soaking in things super, super quickly here, and he has a passion for it, which you cannot finding somebody with a passion for plants and somebody who's super interested in it is super valuable. So we're really enjoying having somebody out there who really cares for our stuff almost as much as we do. Next video is blue and white spring containers. I put together some iron urn containers on our back sun porch with lemon cypress, white ranunculus, and blue pansies, and I am loving them. Bonnie said, where did you get your urn planters? I got them from the garden center years and years and years ago, probably like 11 or 12 years ago. I have no idea who the supplier is. Paige said, what do you do with the plants once summer rolls around? Do you move them to a new pot because it will overgrow the area? So I usually undo my planters and then disperse things wherever. I might leave the lemon cypress in there for the season if they're doing really well and liking that spot. The pansies can go to a shady location in the garden. The ranunculus will probably be done blooming, and I can cut back the bloom stalks and I can plant the foliage part somewhere else. But ranunculus don't survive the winter, so we would have to dig up the bulbs that way. But I do try to reuse as much as I can. Lisa said, is Cheddar still around? He is, but he's not like Russell. Russell likes to be where we're at all the time, and like he sleeps with me, and if I'm sitting doing any computer work, he tries to get on me like as close to my face as possible. He's very much like, he loves us, and Cheddar loves us too, but Cheddar likes to nap. So Cheddar is usually inside during the day napping on a couch, or we have a spare bedroom with a bed that he loves. Shraddha says, do you fertilize the spring containers? If you do, on what schedule and which fertilizer? So I would just use a water-soluble fertilizer like I do for my summer plants, but just less often. I'll do it like every 2 or 3 weeks for spring planters. Typically our spring planters are only together for a couple months, so really if you're using fresh soil especially, you may not even need to use much. The summer stuff is just really important because we're watering so much and those plants are huge performers, and that's when the fertilizer is really important. Pat says, how do you keep all the containers watered on your property? So we are working toward having everything we can possibly have on drip set up on drip. So that's how most everything is watered. We still have some things like the greenhouse, of course, isn't on drip because it moves, things shift around and they're so fast that I don't know how we would set something up that would make sense. But out on the property, as we put new containers out, we always try to remember to set them all up on drip. Jenny said, this isn't related to the video, but I'm desperate to know. I've been scared into not dividing or moving my congested peonies in the spring. It seems like everyone online says don't move them into the fall. Can you enlighten me? Can I move them in the spring without problems? I think you might, like they may not bloom as well as they would had you divided or moved them in the fall. But I'm kind of the mindset, if you have an issue that you can see in the garden and you have time to tackle it now, just tackle it now. Of course, the earlier in the spring you can do it, the better, before they start waking up, so they can wake up in their new home. But I'm reading on, and it says that some of them had botrytis last year, which, you know, if you're having an issue especially like that with your plants, if you can get them separated so they have more air circulation and you don't have them as congested, it might help with that problem. So I would say, like, don't be scared about it. Definitely get after it as early as you can. If it really makes you nervous, just wait until this fall, and that's fine too. If you have botrytis, which is a fungal thing that creates, like, the new shoots will get black and they'll kind of fall over, like rot, and then it can cause some bud rot and black spots on the leaves, and it's usually in areas where it's really damp or moist and there's not a lot of air circulation, where the soil isn't draining properly. You also want to make sure that you cut back all the foliage. I said foliage. Oh my gosh, it's wearing off on me. All the leaves, you want to make sure to cut those off in the fall. It's like hostas and peonies are really important to clean up because of diseases like that can happen. So you want to make sure to cut those all back in the fall and get rid of them. That will help with that. You can also use a couple of different types of spray. So you can use a neem. You could also use a fungicide called Revitalize that helps with botrytis, and it's an organic spray. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. Jay said, on another note, I had a question about starting seeds indoors. Why do we thin seedlings instead of transplanting them into another pot so we could have more plants? Well, you just saw the state of my plant room. If I separated all of the seedlings and moved them into new pots, like, I'd have to buy another house. And I think that's the main reason. We always plant 2 or 3 seeds per cell because germination rate isn't always 100%. So we want to make sure that we get a viable seedling in every single cell. So when we have 2 of them come up in the same cell or more, sometimes we usually just cut them off at the base to thin them out. I mean, these seeds cost fractions of a penny most of the time. So it's not like it's you're wasting money per se. I know it's hard for some people to cut back things that are living and growing, but it's just healthier for the state of the plant. I think too, when you separate seedlings like that, sometimes it can be harmful to the root systems, especially the bigger the seedlings get. So you can risk damaging the one you like really want to keep. So those are the reasons why I typically cut seedlings back. Cut them back instead of separating them. Occasionally, if I've planted 2 seeds that come up far apart from each other in the cell, and then I have like a random cell that nothing came up in, I'll kind of dig one out and pop it in the other cell. But it's not something I normally do. So the last video from this week was planting a Hoops Blue Spruce, which is a beautiful, beautiful Colorado blue spruce that stays a little bit smaller than the traditional varieties. It grows about 25 by 15, and we put it in an area where we removed a pagoda dogwood that was dying, and so anyway, it looks super cute. I love it right there, and I can still see it from the windows in our house because none of the trees have leaves yet, and I think it's really, really the perfect choice for that space. Samantha said, are you concerned about the roots breaking that water line in the future? Yes, so they would absolutely in the future break that water line, like I have no doubt. But I explained in that video that we are going to be abandoning all of the current water lines that are back there because we are going to rework that whole area, and which will necessitate us putting in a new water system essentially. So we're just the pipe will stay there. It'll just be abandoned and there will be no live water in it ever again. And I did mention in that video, if you are not planning on abandoning your water lines anytime soon and you have one right where you want to plant something that gets that large, I would consider moving the water line if it's possible, so that if you need to access it, if there's any breaks in it, that you can do that without any issues. Shirley said, when you're planting a new tree where an existing one used to be, is it important to get out as much of the old root system as possible? Can it harm the new tree in any way? So you do want to get out, the bulk of it, because if you don't, then it's impossible to plant there. And when we remove or have trees removed like that, they bring this stump grinder and they grind the stump out really deep. To where it takes out most everything. And I'll run into maybe sometimes like roots like this big. And in that video, I did use a reciprocating saw to cut some of those out, but I'm not worried about those at all because they'll quickly start to rot and decompose and become nice organic matter in the soil. So it shouldn't be an issue. Janice said, have Benjamin stand next to it and take his picture and watch them both grow. That is such an amazing idea. I think we'll do that. Paula said, it's so cute how Russell follows you around. Haven't seen Cheddar lately. Is he doing okay? Oh, yeah, I think I answered that earlier. Cheddar's great. Jennifer said, it's so exciting to see you planting something in the ground again. Yes, I'm so excited. Like, let the season begin. I'm ready. Wouldn't it be easier to cut the rope and remove the burlap before putting the tree in the hole? Like, you would think that that would be easier because it's like, you know, not in the hole and you're not having to lean over to get everything out, but that's what helps you move the tree around, and it's what keeps the root system together. If you remove that stuff and try to move the tree before you get it in the hole, you could risk damaging that root system, and that's just not worth it. So definitely get it in the hole first and then remove everything. Gardening Junkie said, I'm a stickler for perfect lines, so I have to leave my 2 cents about those pavers. I don't think you realize, but the pavers are not supposed to be laid out like that. They're basically a tongue and groove setup. So you have one forward facing and the next one going in the opposite direction. This way they lay flush up against right up against each other and keep the gravel from getting into your flower beds. So I don't think you're alone in thinking that. I'm kind of along the same lines as you. We didn't put those in. So those were here when we moved in. There were pavers everywhere, and there's still pavers in a lot of different locations, and every time we redo an area, we get rid of them. So we have 2 friends that are both working on different garden projects that are utilizing all of the pavers that we pull out. So every time we do a new area, we call one of them and say, hey, are you ready for a new bunch of pavers? And they show up in a truck and take them off. So yeah, I mean, it's functional. Even though they're not installed, you know, technically correct, it is functional. It's keeping the gravel out of the flower beds, and that's why we are just kind of slowly removing them as we get to it. And also, we get a lot of questions too about the wall for our kitchen garden flower bed, like the little retaining wall, and how all the pavers are tipped back. That was installed like that. I don't think the previous owners did it. I think the owners before that did it. I'm not sure, but I actually texted our friends, the previous owners, and said, was that intentional? And he said, yeah, I think it was. So it's something we would love to do, like a stacked rock wall right there as a retaining wall. We just haven't got to it yet, but just know, like, going forward, that was intended to be tipped back like that, like kind of an artsy way of putting in a wall. Dee said, Laura, will you do any pruning on this blue spruce? No. So there are just so many different evergreens out there. I mean, like hundreds and thousands of varieties of evergreens of varying shapes and sizes at maturity. And I just feel like whenever, unless you're doing a hedge or a topiary, I mean, there's a place for pruning evergreens, of course, but usually you want to choose an evergreen that you can just let get to its full size in the spot where you put it without having to manage the size by pruning, because it does make the shape a little bit different. And when you let trees like the Hoops Blue Spruce just do its thing, they are so glorious. Like, their shape is so beautiful when you just leave them alone, and that's why I made sure to put it in an area where it can just do its thing. And that's it, you guys. That is all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.